So in the UK, when a neighbor knocks on your door, you welcome them in and offer a cup of tea. That, at least, is the norm I learned after being there for a while, and for not realizing for some time that that's what I was supposed to do. There's the intimacy of an invitation into the house, which might be messy, or in our case, is almost always messy, and the vulnerability of knowing that your neighbor is going to see your real life. It takes time to make a pot of tea, and while the pot is boiling and the tea is steeping, there is time for conversation. It took me a while to figure out that this was something I was supposed to do. And only after I figured that out did I realize why so many more moments with my warm and inviting British neighbors had been a little awkward. Growing up as I did in Michigan, I knew my neighbors well enough, but I didn't go knocking on their doors all that often, unless they had kids my age. And now the pace of life is so fast that it doesn't leave much room for spontaneous visits, that kinds of random visits that lead to relationships and friendships. Our communal experience of COVID, too, has inhibited any natural spontaneity we might have had. Zoom is often a convenient or necessary alternative, but there's no substitute for the side conversations you can have with a friend or colleague or random acquaintance during a break in a meeting or after church or while waiting for class to start. And those are the moments that deepen relationships. When's the last time you just spent the whole day with someone unplanned? When's the last time a neighbor knocked on your door and you invited them in, unabashed, without worrying that the place was a mess? It seems like John and Jesus' first disciples had nothing but time to build relationships. It's what they were focused on. They didn't have meetings to get to or really anything more important to do because their lives were about being in relationship. I mean, if someone asked you where you were staying on a trip, you'd probably figure it was just small talk, and that it would be enough to say, yeah, I'm over at the Holiday Inn, and leave it at that. But Jesus invites the disciples to come and see. And not only do they come along with him, but they stay with him. And then they, in turn, invite more people in. Jesus is willing to go out on a limb and invite the people around him into relationship with him, into community with him. He's willing to spend the time it takes to form those foundational relationships that are necessary for trust and friendship. Baptism itself is a communal event. Sure, we have often come to focus on the individual aspects of it, but it's ultimately about lifting up an individual as part of the community and acknowledging that the community and the individual being baptized are utterly and unconditionally linked in Christian community in the family of God. When you're baptized, you know that you're not only claimed by God, but by an entire community, and that your community has promised to support you and accompany you along your journey. And whenever your baptism happened or happens, whether you were a tiny baby or an adult or a child, or whether you're considering it now, that baptism is good for your whole life. That's why people choose to affirm their baptism, sometimes multiple times throughout their lives, to remember that we are claimed and named by God, that we are invited into this messy, loving community together, that we promise to come and see, to get to know each other's real lives, to be a part of each other's journeys. And there are reasons why those who are being baptized and those who are affirming their baptisms answer these three questions. Do you renounce the devil and all the forces that defy God, the powers of this world that rebel against God, and the ways of sin that draw you from God? These questions remind us that although we're baptized, we still live in a world within systems marked by injustice, poverty, the destruction of God's good creation, racism, homophobia, sexism, ableism, and all kinds of other isms that defy God's love. And they remind us that we are in a community together that seeks God's kingdom and purpose, renouncing the temptation to simply give in and give up. That God's love and grace and promise move us toward a better future for all of us here on this earth. That God's kingdom doesn't come with just one individual struggling against the powers that work against God's will. God's kingdom is manifested in community. In our case, a community marked by God's promises in baptism. The road is lonely and hard sometimes, but in baptism, we remember that we are never alone. You are a part of a whole community that is here to accept the invitation to come and see, to be part of your life, and you are a part of our lives too. In coming together, we see and are seen in all of our messy, beautiful, vulnerable reality, faces of Christ to one another in the midst of real life. Amen.